Welcome to the EmpowerElle Podcast. I'm your host, Vero, and I'm so excited to have you join me on this journey of empowerment and growth. This podcast is designed for ambitious, high-achieving women who are ready to break free from overwhelm and step into their power. Together, we'll explore practical strategies, share inspiring stories, and hear from experts who can help you navigate the challenges of balancing ambition and well-being. Whether you're looking to cultivate confidence, transform your mindset, enhance your leadership skills, or find harmony in your life, this is the place for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the EmpowerElle Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here to learn about something that could shift the way that you lead and live. Today's conversation is all about how to reassess and adjust your goals when life changes. So take a deep breath and let's dive in. I think that this is such an important conversation because so many ambitious women set goals with the best of intentions, and then life happens. Maybe your priorities changed, maybe your energy changed, maybe your season of life changed, maybe something unexpected happened. Or maybe you achieved the thing that you thought you wanted and realized that it doesn't actually feel aligned anymore. And suddenly you're looking at your goals that you once felt really excited about, and you wonder, do I still want this? Am I failing? Should I just push harder? Do I give up? And why does this feel so heavy now? If you've ever experienced that, I want you to know something really important right away. Reassessing your goals is not weak. Adjusting your goals is not failure. And changing direction doesn't mean that you're inconsistent or incapable. It means that you're human. It means you are growing. It means that you're becoming more aware of yourself, of your needs, of your values, and of your reality. And honestly, one of the most powerful leadership skills that you can develop is the ability to pause, to reflect, and to realign instead of just blindly pushing forward just because you once said that you would. Because success without alignment eventually leads to exhaustion. And I know so many women who are still trying to force themselves into goals that no longer fit who they are. So today I want us to talk about how to recognize when a goal needs to shift, how to reassess your goals without guilt, how to adjust your plans in a way that still honors your ambition, and how to move forward with clarity instead of shame. Because your goals should support your life, not trap you inside a version of yourself that you've already outgrown. So let's start with something that I don't think we talk about enough. Our life, it changes constantly. And yet, so many of us create goals as if nothing will ever shift. We set yearly goals assuming that our circumstances, our energy, our responsibilities, our relationships, our emotions, our priorities will remain exactly the same for 12 straight months. But you know that life doesn't work that way. Sometimes your career evolves. Sometimes you become a parent. Sometimes you experience burnout. Sometimes your health changes. Sometimes your relationships change. Sometimes you discover new passions. Sometimes you lose capacity. Sometimes you gain clarity. And sometimes your definition of success changes entirely. And all of that is normal. But what ambitious women often do is continue trying to operate from an outdated version of themselves. You created a goal based on who you were 6 months ago, but now your life looks different. And instead of reassessing, you criticize yourself. You say, I just need more discipline. I need to stop being lazy. I need to push harder. But sometimes the problem isn't discipline. Sometimes the problem is misalignment. And that's a very different conversation. Because discipline cannot fix a goal that no longer fits your life. I'm going to say that again. Discipline cannot fix a goal that no longer fits your life. You cannot sustainably force yourself into something that your mind, your body, and your values are resisting for a very valid reason. Now, I'm not saying that every uncomfortable goals mean that you should quit. Growth requires discomfort sometimes. Consistency matters and commitment matters. But there's a difference between I'm uncomfortable because I'm growing and I'm exhausted because I'm pursuing something that no longer aligns. And that distinctions matters so much. So how do you know when it's time to reassess your goals? I want to walk you through a few signs. The first sign is that the goal consistently drains you instead of energizing you. Now, every goal requires effort, but every meaningful goal includes hard days. Aligned goals usually still create some sense of purpose, excitement, meaning, or fulfillment, even underneath the challenge. When a goal becomes completely depleting all the time, when you feel resentment every time you think about it, when you're constantly forcing yourself through it, that's worth paying attention to. Sometimes we keep pursuing goals because we think we should, not because we actually want them anymore. And I think this happens especially with high achieving women who are used to external validation. It was exactly my situation as I was earning my CPA and going for the next promotion. Because we chase the promotion, the title, the image of success, the achievement, the productivity, and the expectations. But somewhere along the way, you stop asking, do I actually want this? And that question can feel uncomfortable because sometimes the answer surprises us. I had to ask myself that question, and honestly, that question was forced onto me because I just couldn't keep going the way I was going. The second sign that it may be time to reassess your goal is that your priorities have changed. Now, this is huge because your goals should reflect your current values and season of life, not your past identity. For example, maybe there was a season where career growth was your top priority, and now you deeply value rest, family, wellness, or flexibility. Now, that doesn't mean that you became less ambitious. It means that your definition of success evolved. And evolving is healthy. I think one of the biggest myths that we've been taught is that successful people never change direction. We used to see success as someone who had been in the same job for 35 years. But the truth is that self-aware people, they reassess often. They don't cling to goals out of ego. They ask, is this still aligned with who I want to be? And that is wisdom. The third sign is that you no longer recognize yourself in the life that you're building. Now, this one is emotional. Sometimes women wake up one day and realize, I built a life that looks successful, but I don't feel connected to it. And I understand that so deeply. Because there was a season in my own life where I was achieving everything I thought I was supposed to achieve. I had the career, the leadership role, the external success. But internally, I felt overwhelmed, disconnected, exhausted, and so anxious. And I kept thinking, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? Because I was pursuing success through expectation instead of alignment. And eventually, life forces you to pay attention to that disconnect. It did to me. Because you can only override yourself for so long. So if you're listening to this and you feel like the life you're building no longer reflects who you are, that's not something to ignore. That's an invitation to pause and reassess. Now let's talk about something really important. Why women feel guilty adjusting their goals. Because this is a huge emotional barrier. A lot of women think, if I change my goal, it means I failed. But changing your goal is not automatically quitting. Sometimes it's refining. Sometimes it's redirecting. Sometimes it's simplifying. Sometimes it's choosing sustainability. Sometimes it's choosing wellness. Sometimes it's choosing alignment. And honestly, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit this no longer fits. Because continuing down a path that is harming your well-being just to prove consistency is not strength. It's self-abandonment. And I also think that many women fear disappointing people. Maybe other people expect something from you. Maybe you announced your goal publicly. Maybe your identity became attached to your achievement. Or maybe you feel pressure to prove yourself. So even when something no longer feels aligned, you keep going because you don't want people to think you failed. But I want you to remember this. You are allowed to outgrow old version of success. You're allowed to evolve, to pivot, to redefine what matters. And you do not need permission for that. Now, when it comes to actually reassessing your goals, I want to give you a process that can help. The first step is to pause before reacting. Now, this is so important. When women feel overwhelmed or disconnected from a goal, they often swing to extremes. Either I need to push harder or I should quit everything. But clarity usually comes from reflection, not from panic. So before making major decisions, pause. Create space to reflect honestly. And ask yourself, what feels off? What changed? What's draining me? What's energizing me? What matters most right now? What do I actually want in this season? And I really encourage journaling here. Because sometimes we move so fast that we don't even hear our own thoughts anymore. We're consuming everyone else's opinions, everyone else's expectation, and everyone else's definition of success, without slowing down long enough to hear ourselves. Now, the second step is to reconnect with your values. Your values are your compass. And when goals become misaligned, it often means that your actions are no longer matching what matters most to you. So you ask yourself, what do I value most right now? Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's wellness. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's family, leadership, creativity, impact, presence, or even growth. Then ask, does my current goal support these values or conflict with them? That question can change everything. Because if your goal requires you to sacrifice the very things that you value most, eventually it will feel unsustainable. Now, the third step is to separate ego from alignment. This one is powerful. Sometimes we hold on to goals because they look impressive, not because they feel meaningful. And there's a difference. Ego says, what will people think? Alignment says, what feels true for me? Ego says, I have to prove myself. And alignment says, I want to build a life that reflects my values. Ego chases validation, while alignment creates fulfillment. And honestly, sometimes reassessing your goals means grieving an old identity. Maybe you thought success had to look a certain way. Maybe you imagined your future differently. And maybe letting go feels emotional. And that's okay. You can honor who you were without forcing yourself to stay there forever. And the fourth step is to adjust without abandoning yourself. This is important because reassessing your goals does not always mean starting over completely. Sometimes you just need to adjust the pace, the timeline, the expectations, the structure, the approach. For example, maybe your original goal was too aggressive for your current capacity. Instead of quitting entirely, maybe you scale it back. Maybe you extend the timeline. Maybe you simplify your priorities. Maybe you focus on fewer things. Or maybe you redefine success for this season. Because sustainable success requires flexibility. And I think we underestimate how powerful small aligned steps really are. You don't need to sprint constantly to be successful. You don't need to operate at maximum capacity at all times. You're allowed to create goals that support your nervous system, your wellness, and your actual life. Now let's talk about the emotional side of adjusting goals. Because even when you know something needs to change, it can still feel hard. There can be grief, disappointment, fear, uncertainty, and that's normal. Sometimes we grieve the version of ourselves we thought we would be. Sometimes we grieve the timelines that we imagined. Sometimes we grieve expectations. But I want you to remember, a different path does not mean a worse path. Sometimes the redirection becomes the thing that finally brings you back to yourself. And often the most aligned goals emerge after periods of reassessment, not before. Because clarity grows through self-awareness. Now, I also want to speak to the woman listening who feels behind. Maybe life changed unexpectedly. Maybe things didn't go according to plan. Maybe you had to pause. Maybe you're rebuilding. I want you to hear this clearly. You're not behind because your journey looks different than you expected. Life is not linear. Growth is not linear. And success is not measured only by speed. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is slow down long enough to rebuild intentionally. Because rushing through misalignment only creates deeper exhaustion later. And I think we need more conversations about sustainable ambition. Ambition that includes wellness, that includes boundaries, ambition that includes self-awareness, and that allows room for humanity. You don't need to destroy yourself to succeed. You don't need to constantly prove your worth through productivity. And your value does not disappear when your goals shift. Now let's talk about practical ways to move forward after reassessing your goals. One thing I recommend is choosing anchor goals instead of overwhelming yourself with too many priorities. Ask yourself, what truly matters most in this season? Not 10 things, not 20 things, just a few meaningful priorities. Because scattered energy creates overwhelm, and clarity creates momentum. I also recommend creating flexible plans instead of rigid expectations. Rigid goals often create shame when your life changes, but flexible planning allows for adaptation. For example, instead of saying, I must accomplish this by this exact date no matter what, you might say, this is the direction I'm moving toward, and I'll adjust with wisdom as needed. That creates so much more self-trust. Another thing that really helps is regular reflection. Don't wait until burnout forces you to reassess your life. Build reflection into your routine. Weekly, monthly, quarterly. Ask yourself, what's working? What isn't? What feels aligned? What needs adjustment? How do I want to feel? What do I need more of? What do I need less of? Self-awareness is one of the greatest tools you can develop. Because when you regularly check in with yourself, you stop living on autopilot. And finally, I want to remind you that changing your goals does not erase your progress. Nothing is wasted. The lessons, the growth, the experience, the resilience, the awareness, it all matters. Even if the path changes, even if the dream evolves, even if success looks different now, you're still becoming. And honestly, I think true empowerment comes from learning how to lead yourself through change with compassion instead of criticism. Because life will change, seasons will shift, priorities will evolve. And the goal is not to become someone who never changes direction. The goal is to become someone who can stay connected to herself through every season. That's real leadership. That's real growth. And that is real success. So if you're in a season right now where you're reassessing your goals, I want you to give yourself permission to be honest, permission to pause, to reflect, to evolve, and permission to choose alignment over pressure. You're not failing because your path changed. You're learning who you are. And that matters so much more than forcing yourself to stay attached to goals that no longer fit your life. Your goals should support the woman you are becoming, not imprison the woman you used to be. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is courageously redefine success in a way that finally feels aligned, sustainable, and true to you. So I remind you to keep choosing yourself, your vision, and your values. That is real power. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning into the EmpowerElle Podcast. I hope today's episode inspired you and gave you practical insights to help you navigate your journey as an ambitious, high-achieving woman. Remember, every step you take towards building your confidence and embracing your full potential is a step closer to creating the life you truly desire. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us reach more women who are ready to step into their power and live their best lives. Don't forget to join our community on social media for more resources, tips, and inspiration. Until next time, lead with power and live with wellness. You are unstoppable.